Stuart, we can now see you on big screen. Please take it away.
Charles, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's great to be able to be with you just using technology. So I'm going to be doing a live demo of the software, but I do have a few slides that I want to share with you beforehand, but I'm really not going to be heavy on the slides. These are probably things that you have seen before. Now I will be talking about Higg, which is our sustainability insights platform. Our aim is to help bring the consumer goods business towards this journey to zero. Focuses on materials and products, but also enabling you to communicate these different impacts. So Higg is a public benefit company. We're on our way to the B Corp status. We're doing that work. Today, we are the exclusive licensee of, as Charles has mentioned, the Higg Index tools that are developed by the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. And our software is what makes these Higg Index tools available. But the platform also has a variety of other tools and features that we've developed and that we'll be developing more in the future. Today, our platform is organized around 3 core capabilities. Measure, where we want to gather information around our supply chain, specifically within established standards, so using standards that already exist. We want then to be able to manage that data to see if there are any trends that are surfacing, to get some insights, and finally to share this. So it's about transparency, communicating with customers and stakeholders. Today, I'm going to focus on that one specific part, which is the measurement part, and specifically our product and design tools. So our product and design tools, there are 2 specific tools that we have. One is the MSI, or the Materials Sustainability Index, which is a cradle-to-gate measurement tool, which means we take the impact from raw material extraction right through to the production of a fabric, and we stop at the factory gate. So that's why we call it cradle to gate. And the product module, which is a tool that literally builds on the MSI, because we take all the data that is in the MSI or that you've created in the MSI and put it into the product module, to which we add the information from the impact of product assembly, retail, distribution, packaging, but also, and this is really important when we're looking at consumer goods, the use phase. So how often is this product used? Does it get washed? Does it get dried? And then what happens to this product at the end of its life? As the name implies, in Higg Index, each one of these tools gets you a score. And the Higg MSI scoring methodology is, to make it a bit short, aligned with lifecycle assessment. So we use lifecycle assessment data, but instead of using 20 or more different indicators or environmental impact indicators that you get in a lifecycle assessment, we use 5 specific impact categories that I'm going to share with you. When we're looking at the impact of a material, we declare this impact for 1 kilogram of finished material. And that's why you usually need to look into the product module, because in the product module, you'll be able to say, I'm using 1 yard of this material that's 150 grams per square meter and is 60 inches wide. So you'll be able to see the impact of that actual t-shirt. As I've mentioned, in the MSI, the scope is cradle to gate, so material production. And we have 5 impact plus 2 additional inventory metrics. These impacts are, where are we? Yes, these impacts are global warming, so also known as greenhouse gas emissions or CO2 emissions. We look at eutrophication, which is the measure of the emissions of phosphate into water, or if you want to simplify this, the overflow of fertilizer into water. So it's a way of measuring water pollution. We measure water scarcity, so how much of making this product is going to impact the water in the area where you're based or where you're manufacturing. We look at resource depletion, so how much energy is going into this product. And we look at the use of chemistry, and we have both quantitative impact and qualitative impact because it's very difficult to measure chemistry. You can measure the impact of making the chemical, and then you have the more diffuse way of measuring what is the impact of that chemical in the environment, be it onto humans, into water, into the air, or into the ground. We have two additional metrics that we use, which are biogenic carbon content. That is how much carbon is absorbed by the raw material when it's being grown. So this works for plants or animal-based materials. And then water consumption, which is another measure of water, but it's how much water do I not return to the environment when I've used it. So those are the 5 impact indicators that we track and the 2 additional inventory metrics. And now, just to give you an idea before we go actually onto the tool, it's relatively simple. We do the data gathering, so we have the data for each processes. You are able to model your product, which gives you impact. We then do a normalization, and this gives you a score for a material. This score for the material, it gives you an idea of how important an impact is within a material, but we'll go into that. So rather than spend more time on slides, I'll just jump over to the actual tools themselves to show you how they work. So if you'll give me just a second, I'm sure there'll be a technical glitch and you'll see stuff that you're probably not supposed to see, but let's see how we can do this. Right.
Stuart, so far, no technical glitches. You've got to hang it together, I'm afraid. It looks professional from here.
Good. The problem is I'm not sure which screen I want to share or how I can share it. Screen 2, and this should be it. Charles, can you confirm that you're seeing the correct screen? So you should be seeing my Higg index.
Correct.
Portal.
We can see the Higg tool.
Awesome. Great. So for those of you that haven't seen the tool beforehand, this is our landing page, higg.org, where you can see all the different tools that hopefully you've heard of before. So we have the FEM and the FSLM, that are tools to look at the environmental and social impact at the level of a production facility, for one facility. We have the BRM, or brand and retail module, which enables you to look at the impact of your headquarters and how things are managed, so processes and programs and policy. And finally, the tools that impressed us today, the Materials Sustainability Index, that I'll refer to as the MSI, and the product module. So I suggest we now dive straight in. So in the MSI, we have 96 of what we call example materials. We have 96 standard materials that are the most commonly used materials in the apparel and footwear industry. Here you can see them. There's 10 per page, and they're classed by alphabetical order. On the left side, on the right-hand side here, we see the different impact categories that we tracked. So global warming, eutrophication, water scarcity, resource depletion, and chemistry. If you're interested in looking at the materials based on one of these scores, you can sort based on these scores. If you want to look for the material that has the lowest global warming impact, you see, the arrow going up, so we're going from low to high. You see that paper is the one that per kilogram has the lowest impact. If you want to see the material that has the highest impact, click again, and we see that it's gold and platinum. And if you want to go back to the alphabetical order, of course, just click again. You have a search bar here. This search bar enables you to search for materials based on their name. So since Charles was talking about nylon, let's look for nylon. So we have one nylon in textiles, which is nylon fabric, one nylon in plastic, and one nylon that is included in polyurethane leather. You can also search by brand name because the Higg index and the Material Sustainability Index uses mostly publicly available data. So we use lifecycle assessment databases, but we also have brands that contact us and say, hey, we have a very specific process or a very specific material. We would like to share our production data with you so that everybody can access it in the tool. So potentially I could see if we have data for Lycra, and I will look for Lycra, and you see elastane and spandex. But if I go into this material, I can see spandex from the Lycra company. And if I wanted to see if Toray had submitted any examples of materials, I can search for Toray, and we have a polyester, it seems, that is from Toray. And we can't see it, so this is very interesting. Now, this is where we're going to go into the structure of the tool. When you're making a fabric, there are different processes involved. You know this much better than I do. We've separated these processes into 7 different stages. We have the raw material source, the yarn formation method, the textile formation, the preparation, coloration, additional coloration and finishes, and finally chemistry certifications. So these 7 stages have been set so that we can look at these stages for each material and customize them. So for each raw material, for each example material, I actually have several raw material sources. So we're looking at polyester fabric. So if I click here, right at the end, and I click it, then you'll see the list of different materials and data sets that are available. And for each one of these data sets is attached the environmental impact information. So we have lots of different types of raw materials to make polyester. And we have fossil fuel-based PET. We have mechanically recycled PET for fabrics. We have chemically recycled. We have chemically recycled with a specific process. We have Reprieve that submitted their own process. We have a partially bio-based PET from Toray, which is how we got there in the first part. We were looking for a Toray. So these are all the different options that we have. And if you're interested in what is included in those materials, in the data set, you can go over here on the left and click on this arrow. First of all, if you go here, you'll see a full description. But if you click on the arrow there, you will see the full description, who submitted this data, the date this data was submitted, and more importantly, the 2 additional flow indicators that we're tracking. So you'll see the classic ones, the 5: global warming, eutrophication, water scarcity, resource depletion, and chemistry, but also biogenic carbon content. That is the amount of carbon that was absorbed while making or growing this material, and water consumption. So all this is relatively theoretical. Now, what I suggest is that we start creating our own custom material. To do this, I'll go into the company custom materials, and I will create a custom material here. Now, I'm going to call this my performance days. What did you say, Charles? I think you said nylon. And it will be a textile. So I'm going to go on and add an actual material to this empty box. So at the moment, I just have a label that says Performance Days Nylon. So I'm going to add my material. And so I'm going to search for nylon fabric. So I'm going to put nylon fabric in. And here you see I have nylon fabric. So if I wanted to have a blend of nylon and another material, I would simply have to search for the other material and say a blend of nylon and polyester and add it here. And then I could add whatever percentage I wanted. I could make this a 60, 40. So a blend of nylon and polyester. We'll keep it simple today. We'll just keep it as a nylon fabric. And I'll go to the last stage, which is the stage where I can actually customize this material. So it's a nylon fabric. It's nylon 6. Let's see what material options we have. We have nylon 4 bio-based, nylon 6.6, recycled, oh, here we go. Mechanically recycled nylon for textile. So let's choose this one. As soon as I select one of these materials, the score for my material will change. So let's go back. The score for my material currently is 15.3, or if I want to see the actual LCA data, that is 16.1 kilograms of CO2 for 1 kilogram of nylon fabric. Now, if I go and change my raw material source and choose mechanically recycled nylon and go back, immediately you see that my impact is now 7.41 kilograms of CO2 for 1 kilogram of fabric. And so I can customize all these different stages. So what I want to do is have a 200 DTEX. So let's go into the yarn formation method and look at the impacts for a 200 DTEX woven. So let's see, or actually let's make it a knit. So I have all the different processes for ranges of different sizes. So I have spinning for knit. Here we go. And that is 200 DTEX or 180 denier. So I want a knit. And I'm going to do this. So that also impacts my material. And then I'm going to, I have already knitting for 200 DTEX, so I don't need to change it. Let's go and see the preparation. Okay, let's leave it there. Actually, I'm going to add heat setting. So in these processes, more often than not, they're multi-select, so you can add 2 processes or more. Again, every time you add a process, it's going to have an impact on your final, on the impact of your material. And here you can see that I have 2 processes selected. Charles was talking about solution dyeing. Let's see if we have data for solution dyeing. Yes, we do. So let's do this as a solution dyed nylon fabric. And finally, let's add a certification. We said it was recycled. So we can add a GRS, and let's add a blue sign certification. And these 2 will have an impact for my material. So we have our performance days nylon, which is a mechanically recycled knit 200 DTEX that is GRS and blue sign certified. And the impact for that is 7.76 kilograms of CO2 for 1 kilogram of nylon fabric. And we'll save this. And now this is in my list of custom materials. So look, let's search for nylon. And here's my performance days nylon. And we can see the impact of each one of the stages here. So we have both access to the MSI score or the LCIA values. The difference between the LCIA score and the MSI score is that when you look at environmental impact, you're talking about kilograms of CO2 equivalent, kilograms of phosphorus, cubic meters of water, megajoules, chemistry units. Absolutely not comparable. Which one is the biggest impact for this material? Really difficult to answer. So what we did for the MSI score was that we took out the units and we normalized this so that we can look at a material, saying an average material is going to have a score of 10 for each one of these impact categories. And which one of these impact categories in this material is the most important, you'll see that it is global warming because it has a score of 7. Now, if you're more focused on the actual LCA values, let's just look at the LCA values. And you can see here, we have the LCA values for each stage of the production process. Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to tweak this material. And instead of making it a simple nylon, I'm going to do 2 things. First of all, I'm going to duplicate it. So all I have to do is go here, this little box here, and duplicate my material. And I'm going to call it Performance Days Nylon Poly Blend. And we're going to add a yield. There you go. So now I have, when I go into my custom materials and I search for nylon, I see my Performance Days Nylon and my Performance Days Nylon with blend. At the moment, they have exactly the same impact. So I'm going to go in here and actually now edit this material. What I'm going to do now is add additional information like yields, because we're aware that when you're making, selling fabrics, but also producing t-shirts and other garments, often we use yields. We use square yards, we use grams per square meters, we use the length of the roll. So we can add this information. So I'm going to say, I'm going to look at this in linear yards. The density is going to be expressed in grams per square meter. We're going to say it's 150 grams per square meter. And the width of my roll is going to be expressed in inches, and that's 60 inches. So you can see here I'm mixing up lots of different units. We're talking in yards, in grams per square meters, and in inches. If I had to make that calculation, I would probably get it wrong. And this is where it's interesting because you can enter these and the system is going to take those into account. Now, please note, when you enter these here, it doesn't change the way the data is expressed in the MSI. It's simply for you to use later in the product module. So the data will always be expressed for 1 kilogram of material. So now I'm going to add materials. We said it was a nylon polyester blend. So we have our nylon that now represents 100%. Let's add polyester. We'll add a polyester fabric and we'll do a 60-40. Now, this is a completely hypothetical fabric. Let's go and see. Originally, our nylon was recycled. It's still mechanically recycled. So let's now customize our polyester to make it a little bit aligned with that. So we'll go and see our different data sources for our polyester, and we'll choose a mechanically recycled polyester for textiles. We will make it a 200 DTEX that is knit. So let's go and see spinning, synthetics for knit. And so as you can see, we have all these different sizes, 200 DTEX, so that we're using the same warp and weft. Same here. Let's make it dope dyed as well. Okay, and we'll say that it's blue sign and GRS in the same way. So now I've customized my 2 materials. You can see the polyester customization stages and the nylon customization stages. You can get them both on the screen. So now let's save this as final. Okay, so I have my 2 materials and I'm going to search for them by name. I've called them performance days. So we have our nylon and our nylon poly blend. So let's compare these to see their impacts. We can select them. And as soon as I select a material, you have this window that appears. So when I select a second one, I can compare them. And this is where it gets interesting. I can look at their life cycle impact data. I can see my nylon is 7.75 kilos of CO2, whereas my nylon polyblend is 7.19. And if you're really interested, you can see the different stages and different impacts. So this is going to be a lot of information because we have the different stages for each material. But you can actually do these comparisons. So this is interesting when you're just looking at the material level. But what impact is this going to have if I'm making a performance t-shirt? So let's go and see and use these materials in an actual t-shirt. So I have these materials in my company custom materials. And now I'm going to go into the product module. Now, what's really interesting with the product module is that everything that you've done is directly available. There's no copy paste, there's no import function. It's simply there for you to use in a drop-down menu. So we're going to create a new product. When you're creating a new product, in this field, there are 3 fields that are compulsory. Let's call this our performance days outdoor t-shirt. It's going to be apparel, and it's going to be a t-shirt. Now there's some more information here, and this is where the product module is interesting. You can get a cradle to grave, so a very close or LCA-like information, cradle to grave LCA-like information using the product module, even though you would potentially only have information on the bill of materials and the manufacturing processes. The tool is built in such a way that it is pre-filled with default data that we call proxies. So you don't actually need to have this information. You can focus on what is your core competency, which is making materials or making products. So now I've entered this information, I can move forward to my bill of materials. And it's a simple t-shirt. So I'm going to go into my list of materials and go into my custom materials and search for my performance days. So I'll do my nylon here. So I'm going to add it to my product. And here I have to enter an amount. So if I look here, I have only weights. So let's do grams. Let's say that we're going to use 200 grams. Now we all know that there's cutting and there's going to be a pattern. This is taken into account in the tool in the screen that we call net use. This is also known as marker efficiency or cutting efficiency. As a default, it's set at 80%, which means that if I have 200 grams of fabric, the net weight of my product is right down the bottom here. It's 160 grams or 0.160 kilos. You can also see at the bottom of the screen the absolute impact of the product, so global warming potential and all the 4 other indicators that we use. Now, this is only the material impact. So let's move forward and go into manufacturing. So I'm making a t-shirt. It's going to be relatively simple. I'm going to do some cutting. I'm going to do some sewing. So I'm going to add some amounts. So cutting is going to be the distance around the pattern, and the sewing is probably going to be 3 times that. So we'll add 200 centimeters of sewing, and 600 of cutting. Now, it's a branded t-shirt, so let's do some printing, and we'll add a large screen print on the front, no, on the back. And we'll add 1 unit of printing. So again, you can see the impact of my product has increased. Now I can add some packaging to my product. And this is where the information that's on the first screen that we haven't touched is going to impact. So we said that online sales represent 28% of our products. So let's add some packaging materials for our online sales. And what do we have? These packaging materials are, of course, standards in the MSI. You can create your own, but these are standards. And I believe we have an e-commerce shipping bag. Here we go, e-commerce shipping bag. I'm going to add 1 unit, and for my offline sales, so in physical stores, we'll do differently. We'll do a hanger. Let's see. What do we have for hangers? Let's look. Hanger. A polystyrene hanger. Ooh, we'll add a hang tag as well. And we'll add a bag, a paper bag. And it's going to be a medium, no, a large paper shopping bag. There we go. So that's going to be for the impact of my physical store. I can now move on and look at logistics. Now for this t-shirt, as we said, we have some proxies. They've already been entered. But for this t-shirt, I'm in a bit of a hurry, and I'm actually going to have it air freighted. So it's going to be going from, let's say, Taipei, yeah, to LA. And it's going to be a flight, and I'm going to estimate the distance, and that's 10,900 kilometers. I'm not going to change the distribution and the distribution to retail because I don't have much information on that. But I do know for this t-shirt, I'm in a hurry, so I'm going to have it air freighted. Retail information, very standard, very tiny impact. The impact of our distribution centers and our retail stores, mainly big boxes that need to be lit, cooled in summer and heated in winter. Then I have product care. The product care is the use of the product. How many times is it going to be used before it gets washed? How many times is it washed? And this is defined based on the fabric category. So nylon is a synthetic, and by default, it's worn twice before it gets washed. But I know that nylon gets a bit smelly, so I'm going to say it's going to be washed every time it's worn. End of use, I could say, is it going to be repaired? Do I have a take-back program? We're not going to change anything much on this one. We'll stick to something simple. And then if you have, we'll give this a bit of time. The duration of service field is where you can enter information, say in my product, based on standard quality products, is going to last longer than a standard product. This is a t-shirt, relatively complex consideration. Let's skip that one today. Now I have my final field where I can see all the information that I've entered. I can see the textile that I chose, the weights, the different processes that we've put onto this, the packaging, and the logistics. If I want to keep track of this, I can download this product data sheet. It's a PDF, and it's really a copy of exactly what is on this screen. If you click the download product data sheet button, it's going to download something directly to your screen. So you can see here, PM export PDF. Now we can save this as final. And now I see my Performance Days outdoor t-shirt. So let's have a look at this and see the information that is available to us. We have absolute impact. The absolute impact of making and using this t-shirt is 6.8 kilograms of CO2. And if we want to see the different impacts, we can see how they are split. The materials is 1.6, so about a quarter. Manufacturing, packaging, very little. Retail, the same. Oh, but we have logistics, and here we can see the impact of air freighting a product. So you can really see where you want to focus. And if you are a brand that does a lot of air freighting, then this will come up. And it's pretty obvious, but now this is a database decision. So let's duplicate this t-shirt to change it, and we'll change the air freight. So we'll change the logistics. So let's choose this, and let's duplicate this product. Let's go and see, let's Performance Days outdoor t-shirt, no air freight. Okay, so you can see how fast this is. I now have my second t-shirt, no air freight. I'm going to select it. edit it, go directly to the logistics and add transport, and I'm going to say it's going from Taipei to Long Beach, which is right next to LA. Okay, and we are going to estimate the distance, but we are going to dump the air freight. So now we're using Long Beach, and it's not going to be a truck. That's relatively impossible. We'll use ocean. So let's save this. Give it a bit of time for the system to react. Charles, can you give me an idea of how much time we have left, please?
Stuart, two things. One, I'm moderating, and I'm not going to let you stop because I'm interested. I don't mind if you go over the top time-wise. But technically, if you were to finish in 15 minutes, I'm happy. If you were to finish in 2 minutes, I'm happy. But I would like you to continue on the detail.
We will, thank you. Okay, so we're our last screen again, and we're going to save this as final. And this is our Performance Days outdoor t-shirt with no air freight. So we'll save this, which will take us directly back to our product library, and we'll just select our 2 Performance Days t-shirts, and we can see the absolute impacts difference. The one with no air freight is 4.64 kilograms of CO2. The one with air freight is 6.8 kilograms of CO2. Now let's see what the split is when we don't have the air freight. Actually, the biggest impacts are the bill of materials, no surprise, and the product care, because it gets washed every time. So this is where we, as designers, can start thinking, how can I design out the product care? Is it possible? Is it worth using some kind of odor treatment, of wicking treatment, to get rid of the whiffy smell of nylon polyester t-shirts? Because if I can reduce the product care, then it makes a lot of sense, because it represents 1/3 of the impact for this t-shirt. So those are some considerations that we can look at. But going back to what we was talking about at the start, we created a nylon material and a polyester nylon blend. Is that going to be better or worse? So let's take our Performance Days outdoor t-shirt again and tweak it again. So we'll change the name and we'll call it outdoor t-shirt nylon poly blend. It's still apparel, it's still a t-shirt. I'm going to go into my bill of materials, and I'm going to look for my material that I created, so my custom materials. We'll do performance, nylon poly blend with yield. So here we go. I'm going to add this product. I'm going to get rid of the original material, so delete. And now I have my nylon polyester blend with a yield. Remember, we entered yield information. So because I entered yield information, I now have another unit that I can play with. It's yards. And I know that to make a t-shirt, I'm going to use between 1 and 1 1/4 yards. So I'm going to use the same. I'm using 1 yard of my nylon poly blend. It's going to be a bit heavier, but I see the impact. Now I have my net use, which is the same. So let's move to our finished goods manufacturing. We're going to do exactly the same: cutting, sewing, and garment printing. If you want to see where you've added processes, see these little green bars here. They show where you have actually added some processes. And one thing that we wanted to do was tweak the logistics. So we'll take out the air freight again so that we can compare it with the other t-shirt that has no air freight. So we'll still do Taipei, and we'll do Long Beach this time. Ocean, estimate the distance, and we'll get rid of the air freight. Okay, so we'll move forward just one save. Do I want to change anything? Now, if you wanted to add any kind of material treatment, you would have to do that at the level of the MSI, because the material treatment is added to the fabric. So if you wanted to do that, we would have to go back into the MSI to tweak our material, add that process, and then we could use that other material, so a third material, we could use it in a third iteration of that t-shirt, and see. Here's our nylon poly blend, and we can see these two t-shirts. There we go. 4.64 and 4.58. Now they're relatively the same. Let's see where the differences are. And because this t-shirt, so the second t-shirt that we created, is heavier, it's a few grams more, the impact of washing, of product care, is going to be a little bit more. See, 1.29 kilograms of CO2, 1.23. So it's an important case that the weight is taken into account when you're in the product module, and it also affects logistics and all of the other stages. And so you can go on and create iterations of 10 iterations of this product, one with a full-on recycled polyester, one with a polyester where you've applied a polygene treatment, one where you have air freight, one where you have no air freight. The idea is that this is a design tool that enables you to run through a few scenarios and work out which is the best material for you, for the product that you're going to make. So it goes further than saying, oh, this material has a lower impact, because if it's used in a different way, if it's washed more, then it's probably going to have a higher impact. And the product module is the tool that is going to give you that visibility. And if you have hundreds of products, which is probably the case, we've developed an API with a number of PLM providers that enables you to have read and write access to MSI and product module data and import those into your PLM system and import some data back into the product module. Now, it's not fully automated. You do have to do some kind of manual operations, but it does automate the process in such a way that you can have import and export potentially 1,000 different SKUs into one system or the other. I think that's enough for today, and let's see what we can do now. Okay, so I'm looking at me, and let me try to, that's it, stop sharing. There we go. Okay. Do we have any questions?
Well, before we get on to questions, it's the last presentation of day 2. It's been a heavy technical presentation. There's a crowd here. Can we all show our appreciation for Stuart, please? Now, I know
Thank you. I appreciate it's the last day and it's the last presentation of the day. So that's really, I really appreciate that.
We've given you the worst slot, and they're still here. Now, I know no one wants to stick up their hand and say, look, I understand this completely and I have a really technical question. I have been playing with the MSI for Higg, and I've most probably had 2 whole days on it, and I now feel confident enough to use it. Whether I'm using it effectively is another question, but I've been able to answer all the questions that I need to get answers to. Here's your opportunity. You've got the Director of Training on the line. Are there any questions which he's been unable to answer? So if we take our first question.
Hi, thanks Stuart for the presentation and for the demonstration. I actually have 2 questions, if that is okay.
Absolutely.
First question is, what do you suggest when I'm not able to get the yarn specification, but just the raw material source for different materials?
So if you don't have the yarn specification, you can use the defaults that are in the tool. As you've seen, when we have our example materials, you can change the raw material source, and then you can keep the defaults because they're averages. And if you can see what you can't see now, but one of the defaults is actually spinning between 70 dtex and 200 dtex. So it's a big average. So you can use the defaults if you don't have the exact specs.
Okay, and can I still decide between woven and knitted? Because I learned
Absolutely. Yes.
that has a big impact.
Yes, you can.
But still have the default without giving too
Yep.
much. Okay. And the second question is, I also tried around a little bit with the Higg MSI, and I noticed that Tencel, for example, has a less good score or a worse score than virgin polyester.
Yes.
How is that is confusing, because then if you start with it, you tend to say, okay, does it mean Tencel is not as good as virgin polyester in terms of material sustainability? What would you reply on that?
So that's a lot got to do with our preconceptions around materials, and this is where data is really, really interesting. And I learn about things like that every day. So let's go back to Tencel. And correct me if I'm wrong. Tencel is a material made from wood pulp. So if first of all you have to you have to get the wood, you have to harvest it. So that implies CO2 emissions for wood cutting, for transporting the wood. Then you have to work on the manufacturing process. So you take the wood, you beat it to actual pulp. You treat it with chemistry and energy to remove the fibers, and then you take the fibers and you're going to spin them. So even though it is a natural material, there is actually a very high energy expenditure when you are making that material. So if you want to see the data that will say, what is the CO2 that has been absorbed by the tree when it was growing, then you would have to go into the metadata where I showed you for each raw material source, and you can see the actual biogenic carbon related to those trees growing to make that fiber. Now, why we do not subtract the biogenic carbon from the actual CO2 emissions of that fabric is that global warming potential, the IPCC methodology that we use, is measured at an impact of 100 years in the atmosphere. We do absolutely agree that when a tree grows, it takes out CO2 from the atmosphere. However, today we don't have a guarantee that that CO2 is going to be still taken out of the atmosphere for 100 years. So we don't subtract the biogenic carbon from the actual carbon footprint of making that material. And all of those factors mean that if you're looking simply at CO2 emissions, it probably has a higher kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of fabric. Now, again, you can't look at just the material. You need to do the study all the way through to the product and the t-shirt. What are you going to use that Tencel for? Is it going to be used for a t-shirt, like an outdoor t-shirt, and it's going to be wicking? Maybe Tencel doesn't have the issues that polyester and synthetic fiber has, which means that it doesn't keep that smelly thing. So you might not have to wash it so often. And if you don't have to wash it every time and you wash it every 2 or 3 times, then the impact of washing that Tencel t-shirt is going to be different and potentially lower from your polyester t-shirt because you don't have to wash it as often. So the material may have a higher impact at the start, but if you look at the whole picture of the t-shirt, that's what you want to think about. Does that make sense?
Stuart, we've just had the online audience Kirsty's watching you from Norway. For those of
Hi,
you who
Kirsty.
don't know Kirsty, Kirsty is the sustainability guru of Norway. She's giving you a big thumbs up. So you're obviously making sense at the more technical end. But can I throw an additional question to the ones that's just been asked? We're
Absolutely.
familiar with viscose. We know Tencel is a better version of it, but we now have Ionic from Higg, which is actually a carbon capturing version. So whereas Stuart's given a generic answer, I've just illustrated we've got 3 grades of it. And the attraction the Higg is to me is that they are trying to have all the different grades in. I have not worked with an audit system which is so broad on its impact data. It's getting me to ask different questions. I'm not saying it's giving me the solutions I want, but I am now asking a better question. That's all I'm prepared to say.
Thank you, Charles, because that's an important segue. I've spoken about the MSI and the product module. We have a third tool that is kind of behind the scenes, which is called the Msi Contributor. So if Ionic wanted to have their data in the MSI, they are very welcome. They can use this tool to make what we call a submission or a contribution. So they can share this data with the Higg data team, which then gets reviewed by 3 independent LCA experts, and then it gets put into the MSI. So hopefully in the future, we would have those different grades and branded, as we've mentioned, in the MSI with their own specific impacts.
Now, I've got a couple of questions online, but I'd rather go to the... Is everyone run out of questions here in the audience? Stuart, one that I can answer, but I think we should log it. It says, thanks for a super presentation. To motivate more usage and smarter choices, why is the product module not also available for free to the whole of the EU? You're a commercial company. I know you need to make money, so you can't give everything away. But we are grateful that you have given us access to the MSI free of charge. But what is your response when you hear a comment like that saying, can you give us even more? Because you would enable the industry to have a much better set of choices.
2 things. First of all, thank you. That's a great question. It needs to be asked. We deliberately made one part, at least, of the MSI access for free, so that suppliers who generally feel the pressure from larger brands to comply don't actually have to pay, so they can comply with these demands about using the MSI. One thing I didn't mention about the MSI is that when you create a custom material, you can share it with any organization that is in the Higg ecosystem. There's a simple button that's called Shared, and you can enter the name of the brand that you're working with. It could be Vaude, it could be Nike, it could be much smaller brands like Nudie Jeans. They are using the Higg tools, and you can simply share that material directly with them. That will appear in their acquired materials. So that's another library that's in your MSI library. As for the cost of the product module, I don't see it as an issue, because the cost per year for an organization that makes less than 100 million turnover is $2,500. That's less than $200 a month. I think as an organization, we can manage that.
Stuart, can I also add in addition, we did an interview with Jason, the CEO of Higg, in Portland. We challenged him directly on pricing, and Jason was actually surprised us. He said, if you've got a problem with pricing, contact me, get in touch. He says, it's not definitive. We are a profit-making company because we need to reinvest within the principles. But if you have a major problem, contact us. Let's start talking about it. But their role is, as a company, they need to provide a solution. And that leads us on to the next virtual question. which is processes get improved constantly, and the impact on the environment might change. How is the Higg Index handling this and updates its data?
Great point and great question. The Higg Index's data is updated twice a year with process improvements, and every so often when there's a big change that comes through, for example, from Gabi, which is one of the larger databases that we use, we update that as a one-off during the year, and that happened this year. Most processes changed between 3 and 5%, and a few of them went up or down, and we had a discussion with the either the specific brands or the people using them, telling them, hey, this is going to go up or down. And you can see this in our training website, which is howtohigg.org. That's howtohigg, all attached, no capitals. If you go into the MSI, there is a change log, and you can see every 6 months the updates, and you can click on an update, and you'll see each process that has been updated or changed in there.
Now, those are my questions answered, but I want to make a further point. This is the advantage of the moderator. I'm allowed to give you my views. I think now people will start to understand how the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, Higg, and the Higg Index are 3 separate things, and they have very distinctive roles. Now, generally, I think people are confused. What does surely the Higg is the same as the Higg Index, which is the same as the Sustainable Apparel Coalition. By defining their parameters better, they've been able to get more accurate information and have lines of demarcation. Now that you've all seen the detail of the information they can give back, it's something we can access, but we need to start having boundaries between them. So I'm still looking for questions, and there are no more questions, Stuart. So can I ask the audience again, can we show our appreciation for our man in America?
Thank you.
Stuart, I let you go back to the rest of your morning's work. Thank you ever so much, and we will speak next week. Thank you, youngster.
Thank you, Charles. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.